In September of 2019, a 31-year-old man named David Paulides set out on a solo hiking trip into the Cascade Mountains of Washington State. He was experienced. He had done this trail 12 times before. He told his wife he would be back by Sunday evening. He never came back. Search and rescue teams combed over 40 square miles of wilderness. They had dogs, they had helicopters, they had thermal imaging equipment that could detect a human heat signature through dense forest canopy. They searched for 11 days without stopping. And what they found at his campsite, what they found the very first night before the full search was even underway, set the tone for everything that followed. His tent was perfectly pitched. His sleeping bag was laid out inside, undisturbed, as though someone had just smoothed it flat before bed. His food was there, his water was there. His emergency GPS beacon, a device specifically designed to call for help in life-threatening situations, was sitting inside his pack, turned off. Not broken, not missing, just sitting there, powered down in the dark interior of a bag that no one had touched. And his boots. His boots were sitting just outside the tent entrance, neatly placed side by side, still laced. In the official search log, the lead rescue coordinator wrote something that I have not been able to stop thinking about since I first read it. She wrote, "It looked like he simply stepped out of the tent and ceased to exist. No tracks leading away from the site, no signs of struggle, no blood, no broken branches, no drag marks, no disturbance of any kind. In 16 years of wilderness search and rescue operations," she wrote, "I have never encountered a scene like this one. Nobody has ever found David Paulides. Not a single trace, not a piece of clothing, not a footprint, not a bone." And what makes this case go from deeply troubling to genuinely terrifying is that David was not alone in this pattern, not even close to alone. Because this same scenario, this same impossible, evidence-free disappearance had happened in this exact mountain range before. 3 times, in 3 separate decades. And in every single case, the outcome was identical. Gone. Without explanation. Without evidence. Without a single answer that holds up under scrutiny. Stay with me, because what I am about to tell you is much bigger than one missing hiker. Much bigger. Welcome to Dark Vault. I am your host, and every single week I bring you the strangest, darkest, most carefully researched true stories that most people never hear about. Stories that got buried. Stories that were never solved. Stories where the people involved, the families, the investigators, the first responders who showed up and stared at scenes that made no sense, are still waiting for answers that may never come. Tonight, we are going deep into one of those stories. So, get comfortable. Turn the lights down if you want the full experience. And do not go anywhere, because this story takes a long time to unfold, and every single piece of it matters. Let me take you back to the beginning. Not just to the beginning of David's story, but all the way back. Because to truly understand what happened in September of 2019, you need to understand the place where it happened. You need to understand its geography, its history, and you need to understand a pattern that has been quietly, persistently repeating itself in this particular stretch of wilderness for over half a century, in cases that were never connected to one another because no one was looking for the connection. The Cascade Mountain Range stretches approximately 700 miles from Northern California up through Oregon and Washington and into British Columbia, Canada. These are volcanic mountains, ancient, massive, dramatic. Mount Rainier, Mount St. Helens, Mount Adams, Mount Baker, all part of this same chain. The forests are dense with Douglas fir and western red cedar. The weather is unpredictable and changes fast. Elevation shifts are severe. It is beautiful, raw, genuinely wild terrain, and every single year tens of thousands of hikers, campers, climbers, and outdoor enthusiasts move through it without incident. Most of them have extraordinary experiences and come home and book their next trip before the mud is even off their boots. But some of them, a very specific, very unusual subset of them, never come home. And the cases that fall into that subset do not behave like normal wilderness accidents. That is the detail that nobody talks about publicly. That is the detail that investigators mention quietly, off the record, when they think they are not being quoted. That the cases in this particular part of the Cascades do not follow the patterns that wilderness disappearances are supposed to follow. And that absence of pattern is what makes them so difficult to dismiss. David Paulides, and I want to be very clear here, the subject of this story shares a name with a well-known missing persons researcher, but this is a different individual. Was born in Portland, Oregon in 1988. He grew up hiking with his father during summer vacations throughout the Pacific Northwest. By the time he was in his mid-teens, he was doing solo overnight trips on trails he knew well. By his mid-20s, he had summited 2 volcanic peaks and completed the full length of the Pacific Crest Trail through the state of Washington. This was not a beginner. This was not someone who wandered off a marked trail because he failed to read a map. David was methodical and thorough in the way that only people who have genuinely learned to respect the wilderness tend to be. His wife, Rachel, has spoken to investigators and to journalists multiple times since his disappearance. She has described his pre-trip preparation in consistent detail across every interview. David spent between 1 and 2 weeks preparing for any major solo hike. He kept gear lists going back years. He pulled weather data and trail condition reports. He reviewed topographic maps until he had the terrain committed to memory. He always registered his route with the local ranger station and provided Rachel with a copy of his itinerary, including his planned campsite locations and his expected return time. He treated solo wilderness travel the way a pilot treats a pre-flight checklist, systematically, seriously, because he understood that the mountains do not forgive carelessness. On the morning of September 11th, 2019, David kissed Rachel goodbye in the kitchen of their home in Portland at 5:47 in the morning. She remembers the time precisely because she glanced at the microwave clock as she stood there in her robe and thought that no rational human being should be awake at this hour. He drove 3 hours to the trailhead parking area. He signed in at the ranger station log at 9:12 in the morning. The ranger on duty that day was a man named Paul Whitmore, who has worked that station for 11 consecutive years. Whitmore remembered speaking with David. He has mentioned it in subsequent interviews as one of those routine interactions that you do not think twice about at the time, because there is no reason to. David was calm and organized. He showed Whitmore his planned route on the topographic map he had printed and annotated himself. He pointed to his intended campsite at the eastern edge of the Glacier Creek Basin and said he expected to complete the full loop and be back at the trailhead by 4 o'clock Sunday afternoon. Whitmore gave him the standard weather briefing, noted a possible cold front moving in late Sunday, recommended he keep an eye on the sky, and David thanked him and headed up the trail with a full pack. That was the last confirmed sighting of David Paulides by any living person. Sunday came. 4 o'clock passed, then 5. Rachel called the ranger station at 5:30. Her call was logged. Whitmore took it personally. He began making calls at 6. By 9 that evening, a search and rescue team had been activated and was moving toward the trailhead. They reached David's planned campsite at the eastern edge of Glacier Creek Basin at approximately 11 p.m., moving by headlamp through dense forest in the cool September dark. And what they found there, the coordinator's own words, was a perfectly normal campsite with a perfectly abnormal absence at its center. The tent was pitched correctly and staked securely. The sleeping bag was spread inside. His food supply, a 4-day supply because David always packed extra, was untouched. His water filtration system was sitting next to his cook stove. His headlamp was hanging from the interior tent loop, exactly where experienced hikers hang it for easy nighttime access. His emergency GPS beacon, as I mentioned, was inside his main pack, powered off. And his boots, his Salomon X Ultra Trail boots, size 10.5, were placed just outside the tent entrance, parallel, as though someone had unlaced them, set them down, and intended to put them back on in the morning. The laces were still tied. Teresa Bianchi was the lead search and rescue coordinator that night. She has given recorded interviews about this case on several occasions, and her account is remarkably consistent across every telling. She has described walking into that campsite in the dark and experiencing a sensation she was not prepared for. Not fear, exactly, but something she called a deep wrongness, a quality to the scene that her 16 years of professional experience told her was not right, without being able to immediately articulate why. She said that her first instinct, in spite of all of that, was still that David had simply stepped away from camp for a moment and would come walking back out of the trees at any second. The scene was so intact, so ordinary in every visible detail, that the only thing missing was the person who should have been in it. The search dogs were deployed immediately. The animals used in wilderness searches are not ordinary working dogs. They are trained over years to pick up and follow human scent trails in challenging outdoor conditions. Under favorable conditions, they can track a scent that is days old across varied terrain. That night, working from fresh ground and cool mountain air, conditions that experienced handlers describe as close to ideal for scent tracking, the dogs circled the perimeter of David's campsite repeatedly. They showed no alerting behavior, no nose down, body forward, pulling toward a trail indication of any kind. The handlers tried multiple starting points around the clearing. Each time, the dogs returned to the tent and sat. One of the handlers, a veteran named Carlos Reyes, who has worked wilderness searches for 12 years, said afterward that in over 100 search operations, he had never seen trained search animals behave that way. He said the dogs were not failing to find the trail. He said it was more like the trail simply was not there to find. By the third day of the search, the operational team had expanded to include over 60 personnel, 2 search helicopters with thermal imaging, and ground teams working systematic grid patterns across an area of more than 40 square miles. They found nothing. No footprints, no disturbed vegetation suggesting someone had pushed through brush in any direction, no clothing, no equipment, no biological material of any kind. The search was eventually suspended after 11 days, not because anyone believed it was complete, but because continued operations at that scale require evidence, a trail to follow, a direction to focus on, and there was none. Teresa Bianchi has said that suspending that search was the hardest professional decision she has ever made. She has also said she would make the same decision again, because throwing more resources at a search with zero evidence of direction is not how you save lives. It is how you exhaust the resources that might be needed to save someone else. Now, this is the point in the story where Ranger Paul Whitmore did something that would change the entire shape of what we know about these disappearances. In the weeks after the search was suspended, while the case was still fresh and the paperwork was still being finalized, Whitmore went into the station's historical records. He was not looking for anything in particular. He was not following a hunch. He was simply being thorough, cataloging relevant prior incidents in the area, the way you do when writing up a comprehensive report on a major search operation. And what he found in those records, in folders that had not been opened in years and in some cases in decades, made him sit back from his desk and stare at the wall for a long time. In August of 1987, a 44-year-old man named Robert Chung disappeared from the same trail system. He was a software engineer from Seattle, an experienced hiker and climber who had been using this trail system for nearly a decade. Solo trip, 3 days planned. His campsite was found intact on the second day when he failed to check in with his emergency contact. Sleeping bag laid out, food untouched, no tracks, no disturbance. A full search was conducted. Robert Chung was never found. His case remains officially open. In July of 2003, a 27-year-old elementary school teacher named Lisa Tanner disappeared from the same mountain range. She was hiking with a group of 4 friends, but had separated from them for approximately 2 hours to do a short side trail she had hiked the previous summer. The group waited at the junction. She did not return. Search teams found her day pack hanging from a tree branch near the fork of the trail. Her camera, containing photographs from earlier that day, was inside. Her packed lunch was inside, uneaten. Her trail map was inside, folded precisely along its original creases. The trail showed no disturbance. No tracks led away from the hanging pack in any direction. Lisa Tanner was never found. And in the summer of 1971, 48 years before David walked into those mountains, a 38-year-old geology professor named Martin Sewell disappeared from nearly the same coordinates while on a solo field research trip. His colleagues reported him missing when he failed to return to their base camp after a day of independent survey work. Search teams found his field equipment, his notebook, and a careful arrangement of rock samples he had been cataloging, all laid out methodically at his last recorded position. Martin Sewell was never found. He left behind a wife and 2 young children. The youngest did not remember him as an adult. 4 people, 4 vanishings, across nearly 50 years. The same mountain range, the same baffling absence of evidence, the same orderly, undisturbed final scenes that told investigators nothing useful at all. When Whitmore brought this to the attention of the lead investigators on David's case, the room went quiet. The kind of quiet that falls over experienced professionals when the shape of what they are looking at stops fitting inside any framework they have been trained to use. I want to be careful at this point because I think honesty is the most important thing a story like this can offer. I am not going to tell you that something supernatural took these 4 people. I am not going to draw a line from these disappearances to any specific theory or claim. What I am going to do is walk through every serious, conventional explanation that has been proposed for these cases, by investigators, by wilderness safety experts, by researchers. And I'm going to tell you honestly why each of those explanations falls short when tested against the actual evidence on record. The first and most common explanation for any wilderness disappearance is exposure and disorientation. A hiker gets turned around in unfamiliar terrain, loses the trail, becomes exhausted or hypothermic, and succumbs in a location searchers have not yet reached. This is the most frequent cause of wilderness fatalities in the United States, and it is a completely rational starting point. But this explanation requires that the person have left their last known location. It requires footprints, broken branches, disturbed ground, some physical record of movement through space. In every one of these 4 cases, there is no such record. The search dogs found no trail. Aerial thermal sweeps found no heat signature. Ground teams found no physical disturbance of any kind in any direction from the campsite or last known location. A disoriented hiker does not evaporate from their campsite. They walk somewhere, and walking leaves evidence. In these cases, there is no evidence of walking. The second explanation is criminal, that someone else was in the wilderness at the same time, and these individuals encountered that person under violent circumstances. This also needs to be taken seriously, particularly in more recent cases where trail traffic is higher. But the evidence does not support it. There are no signs of struggle at any of the scenes, no blood, no disturbed equipment, no defensive injuries recorded in any witness account. And the consistency of the pattern across nearly 5 decades, with 4 completely separate victims with no connection to one another, makes an ongoing predatory human presence in this specific area nearly impossible to sustain as an explanation without evidence of that presence, which has never been found. The third explanation that is sometimes raised is deliberate disappearance, that these individuals, for personal reasons, chose to walk away from their lives. People do this. It happens more often than most people realize. But in David's case, there is no supporting evidence. No financial motive, no relationship crisis, no legal pressure, no prior history of mental health episodes, nothing that his wife, his friends, his colleagues, or investigators have been able to identify in the years of looking since his disappearance. And there is the practical reality of the boots. David's boots were outside the tent. No person making a deliberate choice to walk away into the wilderness at night in September in the Cascade Mountains does it barefoot. That is not a detail that makes sense in the context of a voluntary disappearance. Which brings you, eventually, to a place that investigators and researchers who have studied these cases do not talk about comfortably in official contexts, but do talk about among themselves. A place where the evidence, or more precisely, the consistent, repeating, inexplicable absence of evidence points towards something that does not have a name yet, something that does not fit neatly inside the existing categories of how people disappear. And the most unsettling thing about these cases is not any single detail within them. It is the pattern, the repetition, the fact that the same impossible scenario has played out in the same geographic area across 50 years to 4 completely unconnected people with identical results every time. Teresa Bianchi gave a recorded interview approximately 2 years after the search for David Paulides was officially suspended. She spoke about the search operations, about the decisions that were made, about the weight that this particular case carries for everyone who worked it. At the very end of the interview, the journalist asked her directly, "What do you believe happened to David Paulides?" She was quiet for a long time before she answered. Then she said, "I have been doing this work for a long time. I have found people alive after 2 weeks. I have found remains in places nobody thought to look. I have built a career out of finding the unfindable. And this case is different. Not because we gave up looking. We did not give up. We looked harder than I have ever looked for anyone. It is different because there is genuinely nothing there to find. And I have spent 2 years trying to understand what that means, and I still do not have an answer." The official status of David Paulides' case, as of the time of this recording, remains open. He is listed as a missing person. No new evidence has emerged. His wife Rachel continues to advocate publicly for renewed attention to his case. She has spoken to journalists, to state legislators, to wilderness management officials. She has created a dedicated page on a missing persons advocacy website that she updates regularly. She keeps a photograph of David on the kitchen table where he used to sit for his morning coffee. She told a journalist last year that she does not want people to offer her closure. She has said, very clearly, that closure is not what she is looking for. She is looking for an answer, and those, she said, are not the same thing. Robert Chung, Lisa Tanner, Martin Sewell. Their cases have been officially classified as cold, inactive files. The families of all 3 have reached out to journalists and researchers over the years with varying degrees of willingness to discuss what happened. Martin Sewell's youngest child, now in their 50s, gave one interview in 2018 in which they said, "My father went into the mountains and did not come back. And the best explanation anyone ever gave my family was that he must have gotten lost. He was a geologist. He spent his entire professional life reading terrain. He did not get lost. Something happened to him that nobody has been able to explain. And that is what our family has been living with for almost 50 years. I have thought about these 4 people more than I expected to when I started researching this story. I started with a case file and a map and a collection of search reports. And I ended up thinking about Rachel at 5:47 in the morning in her kitchen robe, watching David load his truck in the dark. Thinking about Lisa Tanner's day pack hanging on that branch, her lunch inside it, uneaten, her folded map. Thinking about Martin Sewell's rock samples laid out in careful rows while 50 years of his children's lives accumulated without him. There is a specific kind of grief that belongs to cases like these. Not the grief of a loss that can be explained and then slowly integrated into a life that continues. A different kind. The grief of a question that will not close. The grief of sitting with a gap in the world where someone used to be and having no story to place inside that gap. Just absence. Just silence. Just the image of a tent in the dark with the boots outside and no one home. How many times does a pattern have to repeat before someone decides it deserves a serious, dedicated, well-resourced investigation? That is not a rhetorical question. I genuinely do not know the answer. What I do know is that the Cascade Mountains are open right now. People are on those trails as you watch this, families with children, solo hikers with carefully packed bags and downloaded maps and emergency contacts waiting at home. The vast majority of them will have a beautiful experience and come back safely, and the mountains will be exactly what they promise to be, wild and magnificent and worth every difficult step. I want that for every one of them. But somewhere in those ranges, at those coordinates, in that specific geography that has swallowed 4 people without leaving a single trace across half a century, the question is still open, and the boots are still sitting outside an empty tent. And nobody has ever explained how a man can step out of his tent at night in the wilderness and leave nothing behind him. Not a breath, not a footprint, not a sound that anyone heard. Nothing at all. David Paulides cannot come home. And the most frightening thing about this entire story, the thing I keep returning to at the end of a long night of research, is that no one knows why. That is the story of the Cascade disappearances. 4 cases, 4 decades, 0 explanations that hold up. If you made it to the end of this, I want to say thank you, genuinely. These stories take real time to research and real care to tell correctly. If it affected you the way it affected me, share it with someone. Drop a comment below with what you think happened. I read every single one, and I find them genuinely useful for how I think about these cases going forward. New videos go up every single week right here on Dark Vault. If you are not subscribed yet, now is a good time to change that. Because next week, I'm going into a case that has been sitting in my research folder for months, and it is more disturbing than this one, which I know sounds like something every creator says. I am saying it because it is true. Stay curious, stay careful, trust your instincts when you are out in wild places, and remember, the stories that should scare us most are always the ones that actually happen.